the Growing Philanthropy Summit was held in Washington, D.C. last year with a view to bring together some of the best minds of the sector to see what we might do to grow philanthropy beyond the pretty stubborn kind of 2% of GDP that it's been for the last 40-odd years, since records began, really. And what's all the more depressing about that figure is that over that last 40 years we've seen quite a professionalisation of fundraising. We've seen channels that people could really not even imagine back in the 1960s, big growth of the internet and digital channels, and despite all of that we've managed to shift generosity in this country not one iota over that period. So although there are obvious things that governments can do with taxation to incentivise giving, what we wanted to do with this summit was to identify ways in which the sector can help itself and think about ways in which organisations can either on their own or in tandem with others try and grow the generosity of individuals in the society. And what we came up with was a series of recommendations that broadly came out of four kind of broad headings. One is the whole notion of donor relationships, because one of the big problems with giving in the US right now is that we are as a sector incredibly good at bringing people into organisations and getting them to give for the first time, but then we lose 60 or 70% of those people who never come back and give a second gift to the organisation. So we're spending a lot of time and effort churning over large numbers of individuals who just never give to the organisation again, and we have to get much better at picking those individuals who we can have meaningful relationships with and then developing the value in those relationships over time. So donor relationships is the first theme to emerge. The second was the whole area of fundraising education and trying to do something to help fundraisers to do a better job of fundraising, not only in terms of raising funds, but in terms of enhancing the quality of the donor experience, because when people feel good about their giving, then they're encouraged to give more and they like to give more. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody. So looking at ways in which we can use a knowledge, for instance, of the underlying psychology of giving to enhance how people feel about offering their support, is one of the kind of key recommendations that came out of the summit. The third area is the broad area of public trust and confidence, and thinking about how we can enhance trust and confidence in the sector and enhance trust and confidence in specific organisations. At the sectoral level it matters because when you have higher levels of trust and confidence, you have higher levels of participation in giving, and you should be able to grow the pie as a consequence of that. The problem we have in the States right now is that our levels of trust and confidence are at all-time low, and they dipped after 9/11 and they never really recovered from that. So we've got a big job, it seems to me, to do to enhance that, grow participation in giving, and when you do that you can grow the pie. At the trust in the organisational level, that influences behaviour to the organisation. So you can encourage people to give away a higher chunk of their income to organisations if they feel that they trust and have confidence in the organisations that they support. So we talked about mechanisms that we could implement at the sector level to help kind of set up achieving improvements in trust and confidence. And then the final and obvious strand to the summit was to think about what we might do to develop new channels or new audiences or new vehicles for giving. And there are a couple that are kind of dear to my own heart there, like enhancing regular monthly giving, getting people to give regularly via their credit card or bank account to support the organisations that they care about, so we get away from this costly, time-consuming annual renewal process that a lot of organisations have, and also to democratise things like bequests, because only about 7 or 8% of Americans will remember a charity in their will, despite the fact that well over 80% of us will support organisations during our lifetime. So that's kind of incongruent, and you would think that if we did a better job of asking, that more Americans would consider it. We also talked a lot in the summit about engaging with young people, not necessarily raising funds, but getting them to the point where they're engaged with the organisations that we have in our sector, and getting them to support us in other ways, so that when they get to the point in their life cycle where they can give, that kind of flows naturally from the kind of engagements that they were having already. And we also talked obviously about the developments in electronic media as a channel and how we can maybe spread developments in best practice out to organisations so that they can get for example, the basics of how you use social networks, how you put together an effective fundraising website, and just some of those kind of basic nuts and bolts that, while they are straightforward, are changing, almost on a day-to-day basis. But how we, pump out that information out to the non-profits that can benefit.